I'm Ethan Reynolds, 30 years old, and last summer my sister Madison publicly accused me of stealing her $50,000 engagement ring during her rehearsal dinner. Our relationship was already strained, but nothing prepared me for the moment when every family member and friend turned against me in that ballroom. What Madison never counted on was the hotel's security cameras capturing everything. The footage didn't just clear my name, it exposed the truth that would destroy her perfect wedding. Before I tell you how my sister's perfect wedding imploded, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from and hit subscribe if you want more stories about family betrayals that backfire spectacularly. Growing up in suburban Boston, Madison and I were just your typical siblings. She was 2 years older than me, and honestly, our early childhood memories are pretty good. We built blanket forts in the living room, rode bikes around the neighborhood, and had those secret languages that only made sense to us. Our parents, Robert and Karen Reynolds, provided a comfortable middle-class life. Dad was a successful accountant who worked long hours at a prestigious firm, while Mom ran her own interior design business from home. The golden years of our sibling relationship didn't last long, though. Around middle school, something shifted. Madison entered 7th grade and suddenly became hyper-aware of social status. Her circle of friends changed to the popular crowd, and overnight, having a younger brother became embarrassing to her. I was no longer her buddy, I was an inconvenience. What started as typical teenage distancing evolved into something more concerning. Madison developed a pattern that would follow us into adulthood. Whenever she made a mistake, I became her convenient scapegoat. The first major incident happened when I was 11. Mom had this antique crystal vase that had been passed down from her grandmother. It was her prized possession, displayed prominently in our living room. One afternoon while our parents were out, Madison was practicing her dance routine and knocked it over. When our parents came home to find the vase shattered, Madison immediately claimed she saw me throwing a ball in the house. Despite my tearful denials, Mom and Dad believed her. I lost my video game privileges for a month. Ethan has always been careless, Madison said with false sympathy as I was being punished. The way she could switch from panic to calculated manipulation in seconds was chilling, even at that young age. A few months later, $40 went missing from Dad's wallet. Again, Madison pointed the finger at me. I saw Ethan looking through your wallet yesterday, she told our father with such conviction that even I almost believed it. The truth was that Madison had taken the money to buy concert tickets her parents had refused to fund, but my protests fell on deaf ears. These incidents created a pattern that became our family dynamic. Madison was the responsible one, the mature one, while I was branded as the troublemaker. The more our parents reinforced this narrative, the more Madison leaned into it. Every missing item, every broken thing, every problem somehow became my fault. High school only widened the divide between us. Madison thrived socially, becoming homecoming queen and dating the captain of the football team. I focused more on academics, joining the robotics club and computer science competitions. Our worlds rarely intersected except at mandatory family dinners, where Madison would hold court with stories about her social triumphs while my achievements in state math competitions received passing acknowledgement at best. Your sister just has a more outgoing personality, Mom would explain when I questioned the imbalance of attention. You should try to be more like her. By graduation, I had stopped trying to defend myself against Madison's manipulations. I focused instead on my college applications, pouring my energy into essays that would get me far away from home. When I received my acceptance letter from MIT for computer science, my parents seemed surprised, as if they hadn't noticed I'd been programming since I was 13. College gave me the distance I needed. While Madison attended a state university and continued her social climbing, I thrived in the meritocracy of MIT, where your code either worked or it didn't, regardless of how charming you were. I made real friends who valued me for my actual personality, not some distorted version created by family narratives. After graduation, I landed a job at a promising tech startup in Boston. The distance I'd maintained from my family during college became harder to sustain when I moved back to the same city. Madison had by then established herself as a pharmaceutical sales rep, a job that perfectly suited her ability to charm and persuade. Our paths rarely crossed except for holidays and the occasional family dinner. During those gatherings, Madison would ask surface-level questions about my job but quickly redirect the conversation to herself. My parents still seemed to operate under the assumption that Madison was the successful one, despite my rapidly advancing career in tech. Then came Kyle Patterson. Madison met him at a charity gala she had finagled her way into. Kyle was everything she had been strategically working toward. Handsome, Harvard Business School graduate, and most importantly, from old money. His family owned a chain of luxury hotels along the East Coast, and he worked as an investment banker. The relationship moved quickly. Within 6 months, Madison was flashing an enormous diamond engagement ring at every opportunity. The proposal story became her favorite topic: how Kyle had rented out an entire rooftop restaurant, hired a string quartet, and presented her with a custom-designed $50,000 ring. It's platinum with a 3.5-carat center diamond surrounded by sapphires, she explained at the family dinner where they announced their engagement. Kyle had it designed to match the color of my eyes. I tried my best to be happy for her. Despite our history, I wanted to believe people could change. Maybe this relationship would bring out a better side of Madison. When Kyle and I first met, he seemed genuinely decent, intelligent, humble despite his wealth, and sincerely in love with my sister. I actually liked him, which made me hopeful. Your sister speaks highly of you, Kyle told me during that first meeting, which caught me completely off guard. She says you're the tech genius of the family? I almost choked on my drink. Madison had never acknowledged my professional accomplishments before. I wondered what game she was playing, but decided to give her the benefit of the doubt. Maybe this was her attempt at rebuilding our relationship. I should have known better. As soon as the engagement became official, Madison transformed into what wedding planners fearfully whisper about: a full-blown bridezilla. The $300,000 wedding budget, funded primarily by Kyle's family, seemed to unlock a new level of entitlement in my sister. The venue was the Patterson family's flagship property, the Grand Boston Hotel, a historic 5-star establishment overlooking the harbor. Nothing but the best would do for Madison's special day. She hired Boston's most sought-after wedding planner, Samantha Green, who quickly learned to answer Madison's texts at any hour, day or night. Despite our strained relationship, Madison insisted I be a groomsman. We need even numbers for the wedding party photos, she explained, not bothering to disguise the true reason behind the invitation. My role wasn't about brotherhood or family bonds, it was about symmetrical photography. My girlfriend Allison had met Madison only twice, but that was enough for her to politely decline her invitation to the wedding. I'm sorry, Ethan, but I can't spend an entire weekend pretending to be happy around someone who treats you like that, Allison said after our most recent dinner with Madison and Kyle. During that meal, Madison had accidentally spilled red wine on Allison's white dress, then made a show of helping clean it while whispering, "Maybe wear something less attention-seeking next time." The pre-wedding events were elaborate affairs that seemed designed to showcase Madison's new social status rather than celebrate her relationship. The engagement party at the Patterson family's Cape Cod estate featured imported champagne and a raw bar with 3 varieties of oysters. The bridal shower, organized by Madison's maid of honor Rebecca, included a professional photographer and custom gift bags worth over $200 each. Through it all, Madison's engagement ring became her talisman. She spoke about it constantly, developing a habit of gesturing dramatically with her left hand to ensure the diamond caught the light. During family gatherings, she would remove it periodically to clean it, which really meant passing it around for everyone to admire while she recited its specifications and value. Kyle insisted on the highest clarity and color, she would say, watching carefully as our relatives held her ring. The insurance appraisal came in at $53,000. As the wedding date approached, I began noticing tension between Madison and Kyle. During one dinner, they had a hushed argument about the ice sculpture Madison had added to the reception, a $3,000 full-size replica of her engagement ring. "We already agreed on the budget, Madison," Kyle said quietly but firmly. "This is getting out of hand." Madison's response was to tear up and whisper something about feeling like he didn't want her to have her dream wedding. Kyle immediately backed down, which I found concerning. It was the first crack I'd seen in his otherwise confident demeanor. When Kyle and I ended up alone at the bar waiting for drinks, he confided in me. "I love your sister, but sometimes I wonder if she's more excited about the wedding than the marriage," he said, looking genuinely troubled. "Every time I bring up our future plans, where we'll live, when we might start a family, she changes the subject back to reception details or honeymoon destinations." I carefully offered neutral advice, suggesting pre-wedding stress affects everyone differently. But privately, I recognized the pattern. Madison had always been focused on appearances, on the external validation that came from others' admiration. I worried about what would happen when the wedding was over and real life began. 3 days before the wedding, guests began arriving from across the country. The Patterson family had reserved the entire east wing of the hotel for out-of-town guests. My parents were practically floating with pride, finally seeing their daughter achieve what they considered the pinnacle of success, marriage into wealth and status. I arrived at the hotel alone on Friday afternoon, checking into my room before the rehearsal dinner scheduled for that evening. The Grand Boston's ballroom had been transformed for the occasion, with elaborate floral arrangements and custom lighting. The rehearsal dinner alone looked more expensive than most people's entire weddings. Family members I hadn't seen in years greeted me with the usual questions about my job and relationship status, most of them clearly having no idea what a software architect actually does. Several relatives made comments about how I must be so proud of Madison, which I answered with noncommittal smiles. Madison arrived fashionably late with Kyle, making a grand entrance in a white designer dress that probably cost more than my monthly rent. She seemed oddly agitated, bouncing between exuberant affection toward Kyle's family and sharp, critical comments to the hotel staff. "Everything needs to be perfect." I overheard her snapping at a server who had apparently arranged the place cards incorrectly. "This is my rehearsal dinner. The actual wedding has to be flawless." I noticed Kyle watching her with a slight frown, quickly masked when she turned back toward him. Something felt off about the whole scene, but I dismissed it as typical pre-wedding jitters. I had no idea that by the end of the night, that ballroom would become the stage for a family drama none of us would ever forget. The Grand Boston Hotel's Victoria Ballroom gleamed under crystal chandeliers, each table adorned with arrangements of white roses and blue hydrangeas. Madison had specified a dress code of formal cocktail attire, so the room was a sea of dark suits and elegant dresses. A string quartet played softly in the corner, though they could barely be heard over the animated conversations of nearly 100 guests. I found my assigned seat at a peripheral table with distant cousins and Kyle's former college roommates, clearly not in Madison's inner circle. From my position, I had a clear view of the head table where Madison, Kyle, and both sets of parents sat with the maid of honor and best man. Throughout the 4-course dinner, Madison consumed at least 3 glasses of champagne, becoming increasingly emotional with each toast. She gave a tearful speech about finding her perfect match in Kyle, though I noticed she spoke more about his family's social connections and the beautiful life they would lead than about Kyle himself. "Tomorrow I become Mrs. Kyle Patterson," she concluded, raising her glass while strategically positioning her ring hand under the spotlight. "I've waited my entire life for this perfect moment." The ring remained the star of the show, even overshadowing the groom at times. Madison repeatedly twisted it on her finger, removed it to admire it, and subtly redirected conversations to allow for compliments about its size and brilliance. Kyle's mother Eleanor watched these displays with a barely concealed frown, exchanging glances with her husband that suggested they found the behavior distasteful. About halfway through dinner, Madison made a show of removing her ring before heading to the restroom. "I always take it off to wash my hands," she announced to the table. "I'm terrified of it slipping down a drain." She placed the ring conspicuously on the table next to her water glass, then caught my eye across the room. Ethan, she called out, waving me over. I need your help with something. Reluctantly, I made my way to the head table, aware of curious glances following me. Some of Kyle's aunts brought gifts, and they're in the hallway, Madison explained. Could you help me take them up to the bridal suite? It's right around the corner from the restrooms. I agreed, partly to avoid creating a scene and partly because it seemed like such a minor request. Madison and I walked together to the hallway where several wrapped packages sat on a decorative table. Just take them to Suite 512, Madison instructed. I'll be up in a minute after I use the restroom. Our interaction was brief and unmemorable, or so I thought at the time. I carried the gifts to the suite, left them on a table inside, and returned to the ballroom, stopping at the bar for another drink before returning to my table. About 20 minutes later, a piercing scream cut through the dinner conversation. All heads turned toward Madison, who was standing at the head table with her hands covering her mouth, her face a mask of shock. My ring, she gasped, loud enough for everyone to hear. My ring is gone! The room fell silent. Kyle immediately stood and began looking around her place setting, lifting the napkin and checking under plates. It was right here, Madison insisted, her voice rising with panic. I left it right here when I went to the bathroom. The initial search was calm and reasonable. Guests at the head table checked under the tablecloth, behind water glasses, and in the cushions of Madison's chair. The wedding planner, Samantha, quickly joined the effort, directing hotel staff to check the floor around the table. After about 5 minutes of increasingly frantic searching, Madison's demeanor changed. Her panic morphed into something harder, more focused. Someone took it, she declared, her voice carrying across the now silent ballroom. Someone stole my engagement ring. Kyle tried to calm her, suggesting it might have fallen and rolled somewhere, but Madison shook her head emphatically. No, I placed it right here, she insisted, pointing to a specific spot on the tablecloth. Someone had to have taken it. Her gaze swept the room, then landed squarely on me. A chill ran down my spine as I recognized the calculating look in her eyes, the same expression she'd worn countless times throughout our childhood before blaming me for something. Ethan, she said, her voice carrying clearly across the room. You were the only one who came to the head table while I was gone. You were right here by my ring. The accusation hung in the air for a moment before the implications registered with everyone present. Heads turned toward me, expressions shifting from confusion to suspicion. What? No, I didn't, I began, but Madison cut me off. You asked me to help you with those gifts, she said, completely inverting what had actually happened. You specifically called me over to the head table while my ring was sitting there. This blatant lie stunned me into momentary silence. I looked to Kyle, hoping he might remember that Madison had called me over, not the other way around, but his face showed only confusion and growing concern. Madison pressed her advantage, building on my silence. And then when I came back from the bathroom, you were gone, and so was my ring. That's not what happened, I finally managed to say, finding my voice. You called me over. You asked me to help with the gifts. I never touched your ring. Madison's eyes welled with tears. The same performative crying she'd perfected since childhood. Why are you lying? This is my wedding weekend. Why would you do this to me? Our mother immediately rushed to Madison's side, putting an arm around her shoulders. Ethan, if this is some kind of joke, it isn't funny. Give your sister back her ring. I don't have it, I protested, feeling the familiar frustration of being disbelieved by my own family. I didn't take anything. Madison sobbed against our mother's shoulder but made sure her voice was still audible. He's always been jealous of me. He's always tried to ruin important moments in my life. She then launched into a revisionist history of our childhood, painting me as the perpetually envious younger brother who resented her success. With each example she cited, many of them complete fabrications, I watched the faces of guests harden against me. Remember when he ruined my high school graduation party by setting off the fire alarm? Madison asked our parents tearfully. This particular lie was so outrageous that I almost laughed. I had been at a robotics competition the day of her graduation party, which had ended early because Madison's friends brought alcohol and one of them got sick. Kyle looked increasingly uncomfortable, his eyes moving between Madison and me as if trying to determine who was telling the truth. "Madison, I think we should take a step back," he said quietly, trying to guide her away from the public confrontation. "No," she insisted, pulling away from him. "I want my ring back." "Ethan, empty your pockets right now." The wedding planner Samantha tried to intervene, suggesting we move the discussion to a private room, but Madison was too far into her performance to stop now. "He's always been like this," she told the rapt audience of wedding guests. "Taking things that belong to me, then denying it. Mom and Dad know, don't you?" Our father looked deeply uncomfortable but said nothing. Our mother nodded along with Madison's narrative, further legitimizing her lies. As the accusations continued to fly, I stood in shocked silence, watching a lifetime pattern repeat itself on the largest stage yet. But this time, something was different. This time, there was evidence that could prove my innocence. I just had to find it. The Victoria Ballroom, which moments ago had been a scene of celebration, descended into chaos. Guests clustered in whispered conversations, throwing suspicious glances my way. The string quartet awkwardly packed up their instruments, clearly unsure whether they should continue playing through the drama. 2 hotel staff members hurried over, led by the wedding planner Samantha, who was desperately trying to maintain some semblance of control. "Let's all stay calm," Samantha said with practiced diplomacy. "I'm sure there's a simple explanation. Madison, when exactly did you last see the ring?" While Madison recounted her version of events, again placing me at the center of her narrative, I noticed my father, Robert, standing slightly apart from the group surrounding Madison. Unlike my mother, who was fully embracing her role as the supportive parent of the victimized bride, my father's expression suggested discomfort with the unfolding scene. When our eyes met briefly across the room, he quickly looked away. That small gesture spoke volumes. He had doubts but lacked the courage to voice them. My mother, on the other hand, had no such reservations. She approached me with the same disappointed expression I'd seen countless times growing up. "Ethan, just give it back," she said quietly. "Whatever point you're trying to make, this isn't the way. This is your sister's wedding." "Mom, I don't have it," I insisted, struggling to keep my voice steady. "I didn't take Madison's ring. She's lying, just like she's been lying about me our entire lives." My mother's face hardened. "That's enough. Your sister is upset on the most important weekend of her life. If this is about attention or jealousy, we can discuss that later. Right now, you need to return the ring." Before I could respond, Kyle approached us. Unlike my mother, he seemed genuinely conflicted rather than automatically assuming my guilt. "Ethan," he said quietly, "I don't know what's going on between you and Madison, but that ring is worth a lot of money, both financially and emotionally. If there's some kind of misunderstanding or joke—" "There's no misunderstanding," I interrupted, looking directly at him. "I did not take Madison's ring. I went to the head table because she called me over. I helped with gifts because she asked me to. I never touched her ring." Kyle studied my face, seemingly trying to gauge my sincerity. Whatever he saw there gave him pause. "Okay," he said finally. "Then we need to figure out what actually happened." Meanwhile, the hotel staff had been joined by James Parker, the hotel manager, a tall man with a precise manner who clearly had extensive experience handling delicate situations. "Mrs. Patterson has suggested we search the immediate area," he explained to Kyle. "My staff is already checking under tables and nearby areas. Perhaps we should also search him." Madison's voice cut through the conversation. She was pointing at me, her makeup artfully smudged from crying. "Check his pockets, his jacket, everything." Kyle looked embarrassed by her demand, but the best man, Derek, immediately stepped forward. "Empty your pockets," he ordered, clearly enjoying his role as Madison's enforcer. Derek and I had met only twice before, but he had quickly aligned himself with Madison's view of me as the troublesome brother. Humiliation burned through me as I turned out my pockets in front of the assembled guests: wallet, phone, room key, and some loose change. Derek wasn't satisfied, insisting on patting down my jacket and even checking my socks, as if I might be hiding a diamond ring there. While this public indignity was unfolding, I noticed Madison's maid of honor, Rebecca, moving among the guests, whispering what appeared to be elaborations on Madison's accusations. I caught fragments like, "Always been jealous, and family knows he has issues." The search of my person yielded nothing, of course, but that didn't deter Madison. "He must have hidden it somewhere," she insisted. "Check his room." At this point, the hotel manager stepped in. "I understand this is distressing, but we need to respect privacy boundaries. Mr. Reynolds is a registered guest, and we cannot search his room without proper authorization." "This is theft," Madison cried. "We should call the police." The word police triggered something in me, a realization that this situation was escalating beyond the usual family drama. If Madison was willing to involve law enforcement in her lie, this could have serious consequences for my life and career. My phone buzzed with incoming messages from friends and relatives who had heard about the accusation. My cousin Thomas texted, "Dude, what were you thinking?" Even people who barely knew Madison and me were already assuming my guilt. As the chaos continued, I stepped away from the crowd, trying to think clearly. That's when I remembered something crucial about the Grand Boston Hotel: its reputation for exceptional security. As one of the Patterson family's flagship properties, it would certainly have extensive surveillance throughout the public areas. I approached James, the hotel manager, who was speaking quietly with Samantha about how to proceed. "Excuse me," I said, keeping my voice low. "The hotel has security cameras in the hallways, right? And probably near the ballroom entrance." James hesitated, clearly reluctant to get further involved in what he perceived as a family dispute. "We do have security measures in place, yes." "Then they would have recorded what actually happened when Madison and I left the ballroom," I pressed. "They would show whether I went near her ring or not." James exchanged glances with Samantha. "Mr. Reynolds, our security footage is confidential and typically only reviewed for official security concerns or at the request of law enforcement." "My sister is threatening to call the police over something I didn't do," I replied, struggling to keep my voice steady. "This isn't just a family argument anymore. This is my reputation, potentially my career if she takes this further." After a moment's consideration, James nodded slightly. "Let me speak with our security manager." While James stepped away to make a call, I noticed Kyle watching our interaction with interest. Madison was still at the center of a supportive circle, recounting the incident with increasing dramatic flourishes. A few minutes later, James returned with Dennis Morris, the hotel's security manager, a former police officer with a no-nonsense demeanor. "Mr. Reynolds," Dennis began, "I understand you're requesting a review of our security footage. As Mr. Parker explained, we have strict protocols about access to surveillance recordings." "I understand," I said, "but I'm being accused of theft in a very public way. The footage would either confirm my guilt or prove my innocence. Either way, wouldn't that be in everyone's best interest?" Dennis studied me carefully. "And if the footage shows you taking the ring? Then I'll admit it and face the consequences," I replied without hesitation. "But it won't, because I didn't take it." After a long moment, Dennis nodded. "I can review the relevant footage privately. If there's clear evidence pertaining to this situation, we can then discuss appropriate next steps." As Dennis turned to lead me toward the security office, Madison noticed our interaction and hurried over. "Where are you going?" she demanded. "What's happening?" "Your brother has requested that we review security footage from the relevant time period," Dennis explained professionally. "As this involves a valuable item allegedly taken on hotel premises, I've agreed to investigate." Madison's face went through a series of expressions so quickly I almost missed the flash of panic before she composed herself. "Security footage?" But that's an invasion of privacy. We're in the middle of a private family event. It was your idea to call the police, I reminded her quietly. The footage will show exactly what happened. Isn't that what you want? For the first time that evening, Madison seemed at a loss for words. She glanced around as if seeking support, but Kyle had walked over and heard the exchange. I think checking the footage is a good idea, he said firmly. If Ethan took the ring, we'll know. If not, we can move on and look elsewhere. Madison's mouth opened and closed without sound, then she seemed to recover her composure. Fine. But I'm coming too. I'll review the footage first, Dennis said with the authority of his position. If relevant evidence is found, we can then determine appropriate next steps. As Dennis led me away from the ballroom, I felt Madison's eyes burning into my back. For the first time in our long history of her manipulations, I had found a way to definitively prove my innocence. The realization gave me a sense of calm despite the chaos we were leaving behind. The security office of the Grand Boston Hotel was a stark contrast to the opulent ballroom we'd just left. Utilitarian gray walls surrounded a bank of monitors displaying feeds from various areas of the hotel. Dennis Morris, the security manager, directed me to a chair beside his desk while he logged into the surveillance system. Aaron will assist us, Dennis said, nodding toward a younger security officer who was already pulling up footage from the ballroom hallway. We'll need to pinpoint the exact time frame. It would have been around 8:30, I said, checking the time on my phone. About 20 minutes before Madison announced the ring was missing. Aaron's fingers moved efficiently across the keyboard, pulling up multiple camera angles of the hallway outside the Victoria Ballroom. The system was clearly state-of-the-art, with high-definition footage that captured every detail. Here's the ballroom entrance at 8:25, Aaron said, pointing to a timestamp on the screen. Let's see if we can spot you and your sister. We watched in silence as guests occasionally entered or exited the ballroom. At 8:28, the camera captured Madison and me walking into the hallway, exactly as I had described. She was gesturing animatedly, clearly directing me toward the gifts on the table. There, I said, pointing to the screen. She called me over to help with those packages. Dennis watched intently, his expression neutral. I see you taking the packages. Where did you go next? Aaron switched to another camera view that showed me carrying the gifts toward the elevator bank, then taking them to Suite 512 as Madison had instructed. The timestamp showed I spent less than 2 minutes in the suite before returning to the hallway. I went back to the ballroom after that, I explained. You can see I never went near Madison's place setting. I never touched her ring. Dennis nodded, making notes on a pad beside him. Let's see what happened with MS Reynolds after you separated. Aaron pulled up footage showing Madison entering the women's restroom at 8:31. She emerged 3 minutes later, but instead of returning directly to the ballroom, she paused in the hallway, glancing around as if checking whether anyone was watching. What happened next made my breath catch in my throat. Madison reached into her clutched purse, removed something small that caught the light, unmistakably her diamond ring, and deliberately placed it inside an inner compartment of the purse. She then straightened her dress, composed her features, and walked back into the ballroom with purpose. She had the ring the entire time. I whispered, a complex mixture of vindication and betrayal washing over me. She set me up. Dennis and Aaron exchanged uncomfortable glances, clearly realizing they were witnessing something more complex than a missing jewelry incident. The timestamp on this is 8:34. Dennis noted, pointing to the screen. And according to your statement, she reported the ring missing at approximately 8:50? I nodded, still processing what we'd just seen. She deliberately created the whole scenario. She waited until enough time had passed after I helped with the gifts, then pretended to discover the ring was missing. We continued watching the footage as Madison returned to the head table. The camera angle didn't provide a clear view of her exact actions, but her body language suggested she was setting the stage, looking at her place setting, moving items around, creating the scene for her upcoming performance. At 8:49, The footage showed her suddenly standing up and causing the commotion that had drawn everyone's attention. "I've seen enough," Dennis said finally, turning to me. "Mr. Reynolds, the footage clearly shows that you did not take your sister's ring. In fact, it shows quite definitively that the ring was in Ms. Reynolds' possession after you had left the area." The relief I felt was overshadowed by a deeper pain. Despite all the incidents throughout our childhood, I had never had such concrete proof of Madison's willingness to harm me for her own purposes. This wasn't a childish fib or a teenage manipulation. This was a calculated attempt to publicly humiliate me and potentially involve law enforcement, all to create drama at her wedding. "What happens now?" I asked, my voice sounding distant to my own ears. Dennis considered the question carefully. "Hotel policy requires me to report any incidents involving potential theft of valuable items, especially when the affected parties are related to the hotel owners. Additionally, there are liability concerns since this occurred on hotel property during an official event. So you'll have to tell everyone what we saw," I concluded. "I believe the appropriate course of action is to share this evidence with the key parties involved," Dennis confirmed. "Ms. Reynolds, Mr. Patterson, and your parents should be informed of what the footage shows." Aaron, who had been quietly observing the conversation, spoke up. "Should we contact hotel management first, given that this involves the Patterson family?" Dennis nodded. "I'll notify Mr. Parker immediately. In the meantime, Mr. Reynolds, would you like a moment to process this information before we bring in the others?" I appreciated his sensitivity. Despite his professional demeanor, Dennis seemed to understand the personal impact of what we'd just witnessed. "Yes, thank you," I replied. "Could I have a few minutes? I'd like to make a quick call." Dennis and Aaron stepped outside, giving me privacy in the security office. With shaking hands, I called my friend Michael, one of the few people who had witnessed Madison's behavior firsthand during our childhood. "Ethan, what's going on?" Michael answered immediately. "I just got a text from Thomas saying there's some drama at Madison's wedding." I briefly explained the situation, including what the security footage had revealed. "Jesus," Michael breathed. I know she's pulled some stunts before, but this is next level. Are you okay?" "Not really," I admitted. "They're about to show the footage to Madison, Kyle, and my parents. I'm dreading it. Do you want me to come? I can be there in 20 minutes. "No, but thanks. I think this needs to stay contained to the immediate family for now. I needed someone who knows the truth about our history." "For what it's worth," Michael said, "I'm glad there's finally concrete proof. Maybe your parents will actually see the pattern now." I wasn't as optimistic, but his support meant a lot. After ending the call, I took a few deep breaths, trying to prepare myself for the confrontation to come. A knock at the door signaled Dennis's return. "Mr. Reynolds? James Parker has joined us, and he agrees we need to address this directly. Are you ready?" James, the hotel manager, entered with Dennis, his expression grave. "I've asked Ms. Green to bring your sister, Mr. Patterson, and your parents to the security office. I explained that we have relevant information from the security footage, but didn't share specifics. They're on their way now," Dennis added. "We've prepared the footage to show the key sequences without unnecessary additional content." I nodded, steeling myself for what was to come. After years of being disbelieved and gaslight, I finally had irrefutable evidence. But the knowledge brought no joy, only the sad realization that my sister was capable of even more calculated cruelty than I had imagined. The atmosphere in the security office grew tense as we waited. Dennis had pulled the relevant clips from the surveillance footage and cued them on the main monitor, while James Parker reviewed hotel protocols for handling sensitive situations involving the owner's family. The door opened, and Samantha Green ushered in a tightly clustered group, Madison, still maintaining her victim persona, Kyle, looking increasingly stressed, my father Robert, uncomfortable but present, and my mother Karen, whose expression suggested she was preparing to defend Madison regardless of what the footage showed. "What's this about?" Madison demanded immediately, her eyes narrowing when she saw me. Why are we being called away from my rehearsal dinner? Dennis stepped forward with professional composure. Ms. Reynolds, Mr. Patterson, Mr. and Mrs. Reynolds, thank you for joining us. I'm Dennis Morris, security manager for the Grand Boston. We've reviewed the security footage from the time period in question regarding the missing engagement ring. And? My mother prompted impatiently. Did you see Ethan take it? We've compiled the relevant segments. Dennis continued, ignoring the leading question. With your permission, I'd like to show you the footage so we can resolve this situation. Kyle nodded immediately. Yes, please. Let's get to the bottom of this. Madison shifted uncomfortably but maintained her composure. Fine. Show us. Dennis dimmed the lights slightly and activated the large monitor on the wall. The footage began with Madison and me leaving the ballroom together, clearly showing her initiating the conversation and directing me toward the gifts. As you can see, Dennis narrated professionally. At 8:28 p.m., Ms. Reynolds and Mr. Reynolds exit the ballroom together. Ms. Reynolds appears to be directing Mr. Reynolds towards some packages in the hallway. The next segment showed me carrying the gifts to the suite and returning to the hallway without approaching Madison's seat or the head table. Mr. Reynolds then returns to the ballroom at 8:32 p.m., having delivered the packages as instructed. Dennis continued. So far, the footage aligned with my account rather than Madison's, but the most damning evidence was yet to come. I watched Kyle's expression as he began to realize the discrepancy between Madison's story and what the video showed. No, Dennis said, his voice carefully neutral. At 8:31 p.m., Ms. Reynolds enters the restroom. She emerges at 8:34 p.m. and pauses in the hallway. The monitor displayed the crucial moment, Madison checking the hallway, then deliberately taking her ring from her clutch and securing it in an inner compartment. The high-definition quality of the footage left no room for misinterpretation. A heavy silence fell over the room. Madison's face drained of color as her own actions played out before everyone's eyes. Kyle took a step back from her, his expression transforming from confusion to shock to anger. Turn it off, Madison suddenly demanded, lunging toward the controls. This is an invasion of privacy. You can't just spy on hotel guests. Dennis calmly paused the footage. Ms. Reynolds, this is standard security surveillance of public areas. All guests are informed of this policy upon check-in. Kyle hadn't moved, his eyes fixed on the frozen image of Madison hiding her own ring. Madison, he said, his voice dangerously quiet. What am I looking at here? Madison's demeanor shifted instantly from outrage to desperate damage control. It's not what it looks like, she began, reaching for Kyle's arm. I was keeping it safe because I was worried about it. Then why did you accuse your brother of stealing it? Kyle asked, pulling his arm away from her touch. Why did you create that entire scene in front of our families and friends? It was just a misunderstanding, Madison insisted, tears forming in her eyes, the same tactical crying I'd seen countless times. I forgot I'd put it in my purse. I was stressed about the wedding, and when I saw it was missing, I just assumed. No, Kyle interrupted, his voice hardening. The footage clearly shows you deliberately hiding the ring, then returning to the ballroom. Then you waited almost 20 minutes before causing a scene and specifically accusing Ethan. He turned to face her directly. Were you trying to frame your brother? Madison's facade cracked completely. It was just a joke, she cried, her voice rising hysterically. It was supposed to be funny. Ethan knows I joke around like this. A joke? I finally spoke, unable to contain myself any longer. You accused me of theft in front of everyone. You were ready to call the police. How is any of that a joke? My father, who had been watching the footage and subsequent exchange in stunned silence, finally found his voice. Madison, why would you do something like this? Madison's response was to collapse into full-blown sobs, a performance that had worked reliably throughout our childhood. Everyone's attacking me. On my wedding weekend. I made one little mistake, and now everyone's turning against me. Kyle shook his head slowly, a look of realization dawning on his face. This isn't about the ring anymore. This is about the fact that you were willing to publicly humiliate your brother, potentially involve the police, and lie to my face, all for what? Attention? Drama? Without waiting for her response, Kyle turned to James. I apologize for this situation, James. Please ensure the staff knows they have my family's full support in handling this discreetly. He then looked at me directly. Ethan, I owe you an apology. I should have questioned things more carefully. With that, Kyle walked out of the security office, ignoring Madison's pleas to wait. She immediately rushed after him, creating a scene in the hallway that we could hear even through the closed door. My mother seemed frozen in place, her worldview visibly shaken. For perhaps the first time, she had incontrovertible evidence that Madison had deliberately lied, not just about me, but to everyone. My father approached me slowly. Ethan, he began, then stopped, seemingly unsure what to say. After a moment, he simply said, I'm sorry. We should have listened to you. Not just today, but for a long time. The simple acknowledgement, after years of being disbelieved, hit me harder than I expected. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. The hotel manager cleared his throat. Perhaps it would be best if we gave the family some privacy to discuss this matter. Dennis, Aaron, thank you for your professionalism in handling this situation. As the hotel staff prepared to leave, the door burst open again and Samantha, the wedding planner, rushed and looking flustered. Mr. and Mrs. Reynolds, she said urgently. Madison and Kyle are having a significant disagreement in the lobby. Guests are starting to notice. I think we need to intervene. My parents hurried out, leaving me alone in the security office, still processing the evening's events. After a few minutes of solitude, I decided to return to my room, having no desire to witness whatever drama was unfolding in the hotel lobby. As I waited for the elevator, a voice called my name. It was Kyle, looking exhausted but composed. Can we talk for a minute? He asked. I nodded, and we stepped aside into a quiet alcove. I've told Madison I need space tonight, he said directly. What happened was... He trailed off, searching for words. It's not the first time, I said quietly. This has been our dynamic since childhood. Kyle ran a hand through his hair. She's told me stories about your relationship, but they were always about you being difficult or jealous. I never questioned it because... He paused, looking embarrassed. Because why would you? I finished for him. She's very convincing. She always has been. The thing is, Kyle continued, this isn't isolated. There have been other incidents, lies I've caught her in, manipulations I've dismissed as stress or insecurity. But this was different. The calculated way she set you up, the public accusation, the complete commitment to the lie even when confronted with evidence. He shook his head. I have some serious thinking to do. I'm sorry, I said sincerely. Despite our history, I wouldn't wish this situation on anyone. Kyle nodded thoughtfully. Thank you for that. And thank you for insisting on checking the security footage. Without that. He didn't need to finish the thought. We parted ways, both retreating to our respective rooms to process the evening's events. As I lay in bed that night, I couldn't help wondering what would become of Madison's perfect wedding now that her carefully constructed facade had begun to crumble. 1 week after the rehearsal dinner incident, I sat in my apartment staring at the Boston skyline through my living room window. The evening light cast long shadows across the hardwood floor as I nursed a cup of coffee, still processing everything that had happened. My phone rang, my father's number appearing on the screen. I had spoken to him briefly after leaving the hotel the morning after the incident, but our conversation had been strained and incomplete. I answered with some hesitation. Ethan, he began, his voice sounding older than I remembered. I wanted to update you. Kyle has officially cancelled the wedding. Although I had suspected this might happen, hearing it confirmed brought a complex mix of emotions. How's Madison taking it? I asked, not sure why I even cared after what she'd done. My father sighed heavily. Not well. She's been staying with us since it happened. She tried everything to change Kyle's mind, tears, promises, even showing up at his office. But he returned the ring yesterday and made it clear the relationship is over. Did he say why? I asked, though I could guess. He told Madison that the ring incident made him realize there were other lies he'd been overlooking. Apparently, he started talking to people who knew her before they met, and... My father paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. He said he couldn't build a life with someone he couldn't trust. The conversation lapsed into silence for a moment before my father spoke again, his voice quieter. Ethan, your mother and I have been doing a lot of thinking. The security footage from the hotel, it forced us to confront some things we've been ignoring for a long time. Like what? I prompted when he didn't continue. Like the possibility that Madison has been manipulating situations and lying about you for years, and we've been enabling it. The admission seemed physically difficult for him to voice. I've been remembering incidents from your childhood, the broken vase, the missing money from my wallet, and wondering how many times we got it wrong. This acknowledgement, after decades of being disbelieved, hit me with unexpected force. I took a moment to steady my voice before responding. It wasn't just about being blamed for things I didn't do, I said finally. It was about never being given the benefit of the doubt, even when Madison's stories didn't make sense. It was about watching you and Mom consistently choose her version of reality over mine. I know, my father said, the pain evident in his voice. I can't change the past, but I'm trying to understand it better. Your mother is, she's having a harder time accepting everything. She still wants to believe Madison didn't mean it or that it was just wedding stress, but even she can't deny what we all saw on that security footage. The mention of my mother wasn't surprising. Her identity had been so wrapped up in Madison's success and popularity that acknowledging the manipulation would mean confronting her own role in it. What happens now? I asked. I don't know, my father admitted. But I'm hoping this can be a turning point for our family. I've suggested family therapy, all of us together. Madison initially refused, but after Kyle returned the ring, she seems more open to it. After ending the call with my father, I reached out to my therapist Dr. Levine, who had been helping me process my family dynamics for the past year. She agreed to see me for an emergency session the next day. What you're experiencing is complex, Dr. Levine explained during our session. There's validation in finally having your truth acknowledged, but also grief for what your relationship with your sister could have been, and anger at the years of gaslighting you endured. Working through these emotions wasn't easy, but it was necessary. The security footage had provided external validation, but I needed to develop internal validation that didn't depend on others acknowledging my reality. A few days later, I met up with my childhood friend Jason, who had witnessed Madison's behavior firsthand during our youth. Over beers at our favorite pub, we reminisced about specific incidents that he remembered clearly. I always knew something was off about how your family treated you, Jason said, shaking his head. Remember when Madison borrowed your bike without permission, crashed it, then told your parents you had damaged it doing stunts? I was literally with you at my house when it happened, but your parents still grounded you. These external confirmations of my experiences helped solidify my own memories and perceptions, which had often been called into question throughout my childhood. 3 weeks after the incident, I received a text message from Madison, the first direct communication since the rehearsal dinner. I've been seeing a therapist, her message read. I'm starting to understand some things about myself and my behavior. I know a text isn't enough, but I wanted to say I'm sorry for what I did at the rehearsal dinner, and for many other things over the years. I'd like to talk when you're ready. I stared at the message for a long time, unsure how to respond. Finally, I wrote back. I appreciate you reaching out. I'm not ready for a conversation yet, but I'm glad you're getting help. I believe forgiveness is possible with time, but trust will take much longer to rebuild. Madison's response was simply, I understand. Thank you for responding. This small exchange represented a shift in our dynamic, perhaps the first truly honest communication we'd had in years. Whether it would lead to a healthier relationship remained to be seen, but it was a starting point. My relationship with my parents was also evolving. My father and I began having regular phone calls, and he made an effort to show interest in my work and life in a way he never had before. My mother was making slower progress but had begun acknowledging small truths about Madison's behavior rather than automatically defending her. They had indeed started family therapy sessions, though I had opted to continue my individual therapy for the time being, needing to strengthen my own boundaries before engaging in that process. My girlfriend Allison had been an unwavering source of support throughout the aftermath. "I'm proud of you for standing your ground," she told me one evening as we walked along the Charles River. "It would have been easier to let things go back to normal after the initial drama, but you're insisting on real change." As the weeks passed, I established clearer boundaries with my family. I no longer accepted blame for things I hadn't done, no matter how small. I spoke up when old patterns emerged in conversations. And most importantly, I learned to trust my own perceptions without requiring external validation. Madison's journey seemed genuine, if difficult. Through occasional updates from my father, I learned she was confronting deep-seated insecurities that had driven her need for attention and validation throughout her life. The cancelled wedding and loss of her relationship had been painful but necessary catalysts for this self-examination. 6 weeks after the incident, I agreed to meet Madison for coffee at a neutral location. The conversation was awkward but more authentic than any we'd had in years. "The therapist says I have narcissistic tendencies," Madison admitted, staring into her cup. "I've always defined myself by how others see me, and I've done whatever it takes to control that image, including hurting you repeatedly." She looked up, meeting my eyes directly. "I'm not asking for forgiveness yet. I know I need to earn that. But I wanted you to know I'm trying to understand why I've been this way, and I'm working to change it." It was the first time I could remember Madison taking responsibility without deflection or excuse. It was a small step, but a significant one. As I reflect on the entire experience now, I'm struck by how a security camera revealed much more than the location of a missing ring. It exposed patterns of deception and manipulation that had shaped our family for decades. It forced each of us to confront uncomfortable truths about ourselves and our relationships. The irony isn't lost on me that Madison's attempt to create drama at her wedding by framing me ultimately led to the wedding's cancellation and the beginning of her own healing journey. Sometimes the truth needs to be captured on camera before it can be seen clearly. I don't know what the future holds for my relationship with Madison or my parents. True healing takes time and consistent effort from all involved. But for perhaps the first time, I'm approaching these relationships from a position of strength rather than defensiveness, with clear boundaries instead of desperate hope for approval. If there's one lesson I've learned from this experience, it's that real relationships must be built on truth, even when that truth is uncomfortable. Security cameras can expose external reality, but the harder work is acknowledging the internal truths we've been avoiding. Has anyone in your family ever tried to frame you for something you didn't do? How did you handle it? Share your stories in the comments below, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell if you want to hear more stories about family dynamics and the journey toward healing. Thank you for listening, and remember that standing in your truth is always worth it, even when it's the hardest thing to do.